on. No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
So sorry.
I'm not ready.
Ready?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Isabel.
And I'm Jessica.
And this is the greatest genre, aka fantasy romance.
AKA romantasy.
Oh, that's new.
I thought so too.
Wait, but is it actually new, or is it like the TikTok Gen Z girlies have been saying it and you and I aren't one of those?
I think it's the latter.
Ah, that's
I'm assuming it's the latter. I think we might be a little bit late to the party.
Well, it sounds fun. We should go there.
I think so too. I really liked it.
But we fashionably late.
Romantasy.
Romantasy.
The greatest genre.
AKA
romantasy.
Okay, love it.
Yes. And here on The Greatest Genre, we will be rereading, dissecting, and fully fangirling over the exhaustive works of Sarah J. Maas, starting with A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yes, and today we will be focusing on ACOTAR, chapters 6 through 10, and the first portion of the episode will be completely spoiler-free. We will be speaking exclusively about the events that unfold within those chapters, sharing thoughts and analyses, also referencing events from previous chapters and last episode. And then the second portion of today's episode will be a very different story. For those of you who have not already torn through ACOTAR, TOG, CC, all of it, and you do not want to be exposed to spoilers, we will give you a very clear indicator when to exit the arena.
An alert in every sense of the word. Be very difficult to miss.
Exactly. And then that portion, everything is on the table.
Everything. Just really spoilers abound across all three series, but we will keep you safe if you are not looking for that. So,
yes, some quick housekeeping notes to get started.
First off, The Greatest Genre does, from time to time, contain adult language, adult content, as does the series itself. Yeah. So, if you are not interested in thinly veiled innuendos from certain red-haired, high-fae males, perhaps this is not your place.
That's
but we hope
okay.
it is.
We want you to join us here.
It's all pretty harmless.
Secondly, if you have not already, please subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel. You can listen both on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but we highly recommend the YouTube channel as we really do love sharing our visual aids and fan art.
Yes.
Everything during these chats.
It really just adds to the richness of the discussion.
I agree.
I think it just adds another dimension.
And then please also give us a follow on your favorite social media platform. We are on Instagram at @the_greatest genre, on Twitter at @thegreatestgenre, and then you can email us at thegreatestgenre@gmail.com.
Yes, and we would love to hear your thoughts about the show. We would love to hear your favorite moments, if there's anything that you want us to chat about in particular. And we are also having an open call for fan cast suggestions.
Yes, we are struggling with Lucian.
We would love Lucian suggestions. That would be fantastic.
Help us!
Yes.
And then finally, your request to keep things kind.
Yes, this is such an amazing community. We love this genre. We are so excited to be a part of it, and we just want this to be a space where everyone can love these books together and be very respectful of everyone's opinions, even if you ship Elreal.
Yes, that's fine.
It's fine.
It's totally fine.
It's okay.
Disagrees.
It's fine.
And now, Jessica, I think it's time to return to Prithian, go over the wall, and head into chapters 6 through 10
all week
of A Court of Thorns and Roses.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, let's transition into those summaries.
Okay. Chapter 6.
I'm ready.
Feyre awakens, because remember, of course, she's been sleep drugged magically.
Yes.
Okay. So Feyre awakens as she enters the grounds where she is to live out the rest of her days. The estate is beautiful with lush gardens, green fields, and thick forests surrounding it. The manor house is huge and elegant, though a bit gaudy, if you ask me. She considers making a run for it, only to realize that she is literally on the brink of starvation.
It's very tough.
Her body is not working. And so she decides to follow the beast inside. Inside, Feyre is shocked when the beast transforms into a man, and not just a man, but a high fae male. I was also shocked.
Who was golden
Were
head.
you shocked?
So shocked.
I did not see that coming. I was shocked.
Say it again.
I was shocked. Yes, a high fae male with golden hair, green eyes, and a strong jaw, which we will translate for you later in this episode. He also wears a golden mask, which Feyre assumes, as we all would, that it must be some absurd high fae fashion. We then very quickly meet Lucian, courtier and emissary. He makes a very dramatic entrance wearing a bronze fox-shaped mask. He has flaming red hair, and Feyre notices he is missing an eye, which has been replaced by a golden orb and has a very gruesome scar running down the side of his face. Lucian demands to know who killed Andras, the name of the fairy that Feyre killed, and the golden-haired man explains that the treaty's magic led him to Feyre and that he has given her sanctuary. He then commands Feyre to eat, which Feyre adamantly refuses to do, even though she is starving. She is instead then taken to her room by a servant named Alice, and her room is also huge and lavish. And it sounds pretty amazing, honestly. She's attended to by servants in bird masks, basically given a spa treatment, and then seems very, very certain she's going to be eaten and has a complete breakdown when Alice presents her with a dress.
Relatable!
And then after some begging and tearful compromising on Feyre's part, she is allowed to wear trousers and a tunic. A tunic.
A tunic!
And then instructed to go down for dinner. Chapter 7. Dinner is quite the show. We get some truly comedic attempts at, I guess the only word I can think of it is flattery from Tamlin, whose name we learn very quickly now, thanks to Lucian. We also learn that Tamlin has, by some magical means, ensured that Feyre's family are safe and cared for, and he also tells her that if she should flee, meaning crossing the Prithian border, her family will no longer be taken care of. So that sort of magical situation that is keeping them safe will go away. Feyre realizes in this moment that all of her hopes of trying to escape are now for nothing, because even if she managed to somehow get out, her family would likely resent her return more than celebrate it. Just
sad.
So sad. The next morning, Feyre encounters Tamlin on her way out for a walk in the garden, and as they speak, he explains that there is a blight upon the lands, a sickness that has been spreading slowly for 50 years. He explains that the masks are a result of the blight, and that they have been unable to remove them since a surge in the blight that happened during a masquerade ball 49 years ago.
So tough.
I can't even begin to imagine that.
We'll discuss.
Tamlin offers her a tour, which Feyre turns down, prompting Tamlin to ask her if she has a problem with him. He seems pretty offended, and Feyre is 11 out of 10 still paranoid that she's going to be maimed, eaten, or otherwise murdered by Tamlin or the members of his court.
She is really concerned about
really
it.
fixated on this I'm gonna get eaten bit. Chapter 8. Feyre wanders the grounds on her own, mapping out places to hide or potential escape routes. She also has a brief moment where she feels like she's being watched, but the only thing she can see are two patches of shimmering light. We have another dinner together with the three of them, during which Lucian is once again the Sultan of Sass.
Oh, I like that. The Sultan of
Very
Sass.
dry. Everything is dripping with sarcasm and disdain, which I love.
It's very hot.
It's great. Feyre also steals a knife and reveals to Tamlin and Lucian that her mother died when she was very young, after which Tamlin tells her pretty genuinely that he is sorry for her loss. Feyre reacts to this by storming out of the dining room and resolves to try and persuade Lucian to advocate for her release. Chapter 9. Feyre wakes up the next day with her new plan in mind, convince Lucian to speak to Tamlin about finding another loophole in the treaty that will allow her to leave. On her way to find Lucian, she encounters Tamlin, who offers her a ride around the grounds and Feyre turns him down again and says she wants to
Very
spend
tough
the day
for Tamlin.
alone, which is a lie. Feyre does find Lucien and joins him on his patrol, which he tells her was actually Andros's patrol, which is a little bit awkward. Feyre apologizes to Lucien, rather begrudgingly, I might add, for killing his friend. Lucien doesn't buy it for a second and then proceeds to call her out for her plan before she can say a word about getting Tamlin to release her. And he also squashes her hopes by saying there is no second loophole. Like, it is not happening. This is it. Lucien and Feyre speak a bit more about Tamlin's court, the differences between the High Fae and the Lesser Fairies, one in particular, the Surreal, a creature that will answer any question for you if you can capture it. But their ride is brought to an abrupt halt when Lucien senses something and orders Feyre to look straight ahead no matter what she hears or feels. Chapter 10. The encounter with a malicious, sinister creature called a boggy. Which is a really tough sentence to say.
To say with a straight face.
Because the boggy just sounds the opposite of sinister.
It also sounds like bogey, which comes out of your nose.
Oh, I forgot you all call them bogies. We call them boogers.
Ew. Now I'm gonna call the boggy a booger anytime I hear it.
Boggy.
Sorry, resume.
The boggy leaves Feyre somehow even more terrified of Brithian than she was before. She and Lucien go back to the manor, where Tamlin is visibly and also understandably miffed that Feyre very clearly did not want to spend the day alone. I would also be kind of pissy.
I know, me too.
I would. But his attention is sort of immediately diverted when Lucien alerts him to the boggy's presence.
I'm sorry. I won't make eye contact with you when you say the word boggy.
Boggy's presence on the ground. So Tamlin gets up and leaves, and Lucien explains that he's gone to hunt the boggy. And he is the only one powerful enough to do so. Which is very hot.
Yes, that is very hot.
Yes. So that night, Feyre finds herself unable to go to sleep, and she's looking out the window, watching for Tamlin to return. Almost as if she were worried.
Oh, funny how those things end up working out.
That all of a sudden you're wondering if you'll ever see that strong jaw again.
Yeah.
Just as she convinces herself that she's being foolish, she does see something coming towards the manor, but it is not Tamlin. It is her father.
Dun dun dun!
Oh my god! And that brings us to the end of chapter 10.
Whew!
Yes.
Jessica, nicely done.
Thank you.
I do love your summaries.
Oh, thank
They
you.
bring me joy.
I'm so glad.
So I think before we dive into breaking it all down, let's take a step back and look at our new surroundings.
Yes, we've had a very literal change of scenery here.
Yes. So we are now in the Spring Court.
Yes.
And we are going to throw up one of our favorite artists. This is artworks by Roki. I think that's how you say the name. I'm not sure. We will tag them
I do believe
in the
that's how you
comments.
say the name.
So you guys can take a look at this is how we visualize the Spring Court to be.
Yes.
And this is
Something about the white
it's the alabaster, the marble. It's
against
stunning.
the green. It's stunning. Although still a bit
Goldie, if you ask me. I did want to pull out this comment, quote that I think just describes it really nicely. It's right at the beginning of chapter 6. I'd never seen anything like it. Even our former manor couldn't compare. Again, sidebar, like they used to be rich AF. I feel like I keep forgetting that, but it's an important note.
Well, and I think it's
The
because
Feyre's
I think we forget because Feyre was so young that it's difficult for her to remember.
And also, she wasn't driven by materialistic things, ever. Even when they were incredibly wealthy. But anyway, even our former manor couldn't compare. It was veiled in roses and ivy, with patios and balconies and staircases sprouting from its alabaster sides. The grounds were encased by woods, but stretched so far that I could barely see the distant line of the forest. So much color, So much sunlight and movement and texture. I could hardly drink it in fast enough. To paint it would be useless. I would never do it justice. So I think it sets it up really nicely.
It does.
The scenery that we're in.
Oh, and it's such a contrast to the bleak, colorless, lifeless landscape.
Yeah, like I imagine the woods being like almost under a filter. Just that all the colors are muted and dulled, and it's like you step into a watercolor and you put one of those vibrant Instagram filters on, and suddenly everything's popping, you know?
It's lo-fi.
Exactly. But it's civilized, clean, beautiful. We get a lot of birds chattering, a lot of light breezes.
Yes.
Like it seems
I
incredibly...
picture the English countryside in like full sunshine colors, just
everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. There are
and
mentions of like fields and crabapple trees, and it just seems very whimsical and beautiful.
And full of life, but also void of life. She sort of immediately notices that while everything inanimate is bursting with life, the trees, the vegetation, it's very quiet.
Yes, she does like reference a lot how empty it seems.
Yes.
And there's something slightly... and of course, this is again, like immediately I think of Beauty and the Beast, because it's the exact same experience when Belle comes into the Beast castle.
Yes.
This is a Beauty and the Beast story.
Yes.
So I love that contrast, like, immediately from the first 5 chapters to the second 5 chapters. And the Spring Court, I think, is, like, a really fun new backdrop for us.
It is. It's very exciting, and I think it is a really perfect, dramatic dichotomy to the mortal lands. This is sort of the ultimate shock to her system. Not only is it so different from what she is used to, it's also nothing like what she was expecting.
Exactly, and that goes with the people as well that she is meeting. So we kind of get our first real conversations with Tamlin and Lucian and later on Alice. But should we talk a little bit about this first interaction with Tamlin and Lucian?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And first of all, I just really cannot state enough how shocked I was to find out the beast was not a beast. Shocked, I tell you.
First impressions of Tamlin, he has this mask on his face that is golden with different whorls and patterns on it. He wears a baldric,
which I had to Google.
Indications that he is a warrior of some sort.
Yes, and we will also, for those of you who read the word baldric and accepted it, but maybe didn't have a full visual of what that looks like, here on your screen is what it is.
Think Renaissance fair.
Yes. And I also, this image is actually, I Googled tunic and baldric outfit.
Oh, fun.
And then I was like, okay. Yes.
I understand now.
I understand. I wasn't far off in my imagination, but it was good to know.
I feel like it's how men in fantasy romance novels dress.
Yes.
I just never heard the word baldric either. I mean, I knew what it was, but like I figured it out with the weapons later on attached to it.
Yes.
A lot of focus on those striking green eyes. Still.
Listen. So we've got several very clear indicators here that our golden-haired, green-eyed, strong-jawed, high-fae male. He's hot.
And there are other like indicators in all romantasy books.
Yes.
That someone is attractive. A broad hand is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Broad shoulders as well. Mm-hmm. Golden tanned skin.
Oh yeah, always. Mm-hmm. Corded muscle.
That's a big one.
That's
a big one. Also, like high cheekbones, which obviously we don't have
full
here
mouth.
That one. That's the worst one. That's where you know you are just toast. There's no hope for you if he has a full mouth.
And Tamlin has all of these things.
He does. Yes. The foundation has been laid.
Although, as hot as he may be, his chat, as we like to say in England, maybe could use some work.
Not great. He is a man, or I guess I should say a fae male of few words.
We'll talk about that adjustment in a minute.
of few words. He really is. He's also very bossy.
And a little bit aloof.
Yeah. To be
fair, Lucian does say that it has been a few decades since he's flirted with someone, and so maybe he's rusty. I mean,
this isn't even about flirting yet. He's just
interacting.
Yeah,
seems to be
it's
troublesome.
Just general communication seems to be tough.
I mean, when he says your hair is clean, that is a very tough look for Tamlin.
I mean, at least he's not doing false flattery. Like, then on the other hand, you've got Lucian, who's doing his very sarcastic bow and telling her that her eyes are like stars. And I think, honestly, that makes her more uncomfortable than Tamlin identifying that she has been bait.
I am just gonna say it. I love Lucian's banter.
Oh,
I
do
think
too.
he is so funny.
The sarcasm is so well crafted.
It's dripping in sarcasm.
And just always with the disdain.
My 2 notes for Lucian that I originally wrote down were dramatic and kind of a dick.
Eventually, during these chapters, she actually calls him a prick.
Yeah, he deserved it in that little interaction, I think.
Well, she also kind of deserved what he said to her, which was, are you ever going to be anything other than dull and boring? Or dull and serious, like something like that. And
Very
she just
tough.
quips back and says, are you ever not a prick? and then he says, better.
I always like these interactions between 2 characters because it's like you can just tell in the long run they're going to be friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think one of the first lines, I wrote it down with Lucian was, a pity I didn't have the arrow now, so I could shoot him instead. She just right off the bat is like, I would like to verbally joust with this man.
Yes.
Sorry, male.
Male.
Okay, we got to talk about this real quick.
Yes,
And the
let's go
adjustment.
ahead and cover this because it was absolutely an adjustment for me when I was first reading the books, and I was really not sure how I felt about it.
Yeah, me as well, especially since I had been through kind of a reading hiatus, and these books were really what was the catalyst for the 50 books that I read in 2022. The first one was ACOTAR.
Yeah.
And so I was rusty on romantasy in general, and then they started throwing around the words males and females all over the place, and I was
pretty
like...
much exclusively when referring to gender. Yeah.
Yeah, and like...
It's very biological.
Yes. Anatomical.
Yes. But also interesting, because when you're in the mortal realm, she doesn't say male and female. She calls Ezekiel a boy.
Yes. Well, he is a boy.
Well, yes. But she also uses terms like man. And I think that is because to use the phrase man and woman, it actually implies that they're mortals.
Correct. Yes. And so that
Which
is
was
a
an
reason.
important realization for me. I was like, oh, okay, I understand why we're doing this here, because you also find out how primal, like they're
Yes.
a little bit animalistic.
100%. And that feeds
And it
into
starts
the whole
to make
male-female thing.
sense later on. It doesn't feel right to call Tamlin. I was saying
A man.
and it doesn't feel right anymore.
And then the
to
more
say
you
that.
read ACOTAR, and then you go on with Mist and Fury, Wings and Ruin, etc., etc., you find yourself thinking that the words man and woman are kind of weird.
All of a sudden it does. You do a complete reversal on it. It's really impressive the way she can just fully immerse you into the world.
Yes, that is what we
she's
call
created.
the dark place. And we were there for a while. It was a place of joy, but it was the dark place because
it was a comforting, dark place.
very disconnected from reality.
The real world was the sad place.
It really was. Those were dark times, Jessica.
Yes, so we've met Lucian, we've met Tamlin, and the next character that we come into contact with is
Alice.
Alice.
Who seems lovely.
She's Mrs. Potts.
Literally.
She's Mrs. Potts.
And she gives Feyre the makeover scene.
Which, on one hand, does sound lovely, but on the other hand, it's never great when you hear that someone has been plucked like a chicken.
Yes, ready for dinner. Very tough. And then that leads me to believe, what was being plucked? Was it like her eyebrows?
Eyebrows?
Was she having a wax?
Was it like her armpits?
Maybe?
I really hope nobody was plucking her armpit hair, because that would take a very long time and it would hurt a lot.
But It was nice to see Farrah finally getting some TLC, and I think that Alice was the woman to do it.
Yeah, and
she's got a very motherly vibe about her.
You trust Alice
right away.
And even though she dishes out a little bit of tough love,
yes,
I think you just get the sense from Alice that this is someone who is not a threat.
Exactly. Farrah can feel safe with her.
Regardless of the fact that Farrah sees everyone as a threat during these chapters. And
literally thinks she's going to get
adamantly
eaten.
Refuses to accept any reality other than the reality that somebody is going to eat her.
And Alice is like, my girl, we don't care enough about you because you're insignificant.
How many people have to tell Farrah that they are all under orders not to, like, harm her in any way?
And at this point, she still believes that fairies can't lie. So she is literally contradicting herself. There is this kind of really heartbreaking moment where she does look in the mirror, and this is like, I think in chapter 7 this happens.
I was going to say, I don't think it's that first night because she's very fixated on the clothes.
And the fact that she will refuse to wear a dress, which I just have to say really resonated with me.
I found it to be very overly dramatic.
She's looking in the mirror and she says, I was a far cry from ugly, but I bore too much of the people we'd hated and loved for Nesta to stand it. This is so sad.
I think in that scene, she also notes that her face looks kind of skeletal.
Yeah.
You know, her features are sort of protruding because she's so malnourished.
Yeah, and I think that we forget this sometimes because we're so focused on, you know,
the whimsy,
the budding
and
love story,
yes,
and the whimsy and all of it, and the new world, and it's also fantastical, but it's like she has come from a really, really tough past, and we have to bear that in mind as we have these discussions about her character arc and her growth, what she is coming from.
Yes. No, she is terrified, she is alone, and she is very malnourished, which brings us to the dinner table, which I have
some notes on. Even I, while rereading it, was like, all right.
Listen, we've been reading the fantasy genre for quite some time.
Yeah.
Okay? We are no stranger to a fantastical feast.
No. In fact, I quite enjoy those moments.
I do as well, all right? And while the hobbits may have set a very high bar, the description of the food on the table here is not doing it for me, okay?
Elaborate.
We start out with chicken, peas, asparagus, and fish. No descriptors, just fish. Okay, chicken, peas, asparagus, and fish. That's not an appetizing, like, where is the roast duck?
Yeah.
You know,
and where is gravy?
Where is the salted pork?
Oh, yeah, the salted pork. You say?
Yes. And like, again, just an alarming absence of root vegetables. Where are the potatoes?
There is always potatoes.
And even things that I would never really eat, like, you know, like stuffed quail or something like that.
And given the staggering wealth that we saw in every single other room.
Like, why chicken and peas?
And fish.
And fish. Nondescript fish. Like,
at least give me some sea bass.
And like, I think there might have been mention of bread, but no butter. Where is the cheese?
No, she mentions bread again with the meat and the sauce.
And the sauce. Thank you for bringing us to the sauce. I was really struggling with Tamlin just piling meats and sauces on her plate. Like, is this a barbecue restaurant? Yeah, and then she's wiping up the sauce with
she's
the
thinking about licking
crumbs.
it clean, and it's just gross.
It just didn't do it for me. On the list of fantasy feasts that I've read about in books, this one, it did not make me hungry.
The feast, will give it, what, a 2 out of 10? 3 out of 10? I'm sure the feast was a 10 out of 10. The descriptors could use some work. I would like to pivot to Tamlin's attempt at flirtation in this chapter.
Also, very nosy about Feyre's love life.
I know. And she was
Subtle.
like, I was close to the man back home. And did you love this man?
What's it to you?
Like, what a weird question to ask a stranger that just showed up at your doorstep.
And Lucian is, like, chiming in, too, you know? Being like, oh, do you not find us attractive?
What did you call him? The King of Sass? No.
The Sultan of Sass.
The Sultan of Sass?
Yes.
I mean, he is that.
Yes.
But he is very hot with his fiery red hair.
We also haven't really talked about the golden eye.
I know, and you know that later on that's gonna pop up as like having some kind of significance.
There's a very funny moment that I missed earlier, but when I was rereading it this morning, I noticed it and it made me giggle. And she said that she had a very unnerving moment where she wondered if the golden orb could see out of the back of his head, and I immediately thought of Mad Eye Moody.
Oh my god, that is. Do you think that she took like a little
Finnegan.
bit of? Because I've noticed that SJM sometimes like draws inspiration from some of our favorite like movies and TV shows. I wonder if she was thinking of Mad Eye Moody. I wonder if she was thinking of Mad Eye Moody when she did that.
Especially with the scar.
Yes.
Ooh.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, we discovered that right.
That
this
was
moment.
live. You just watched that happen live.
That was in no one's notes.
No.
But I like that.
It made me think about it. It just immediately made me think of Seamus putting the gum under his desk. Oh, God.
You need to find somewhere else with your chewing gum, Seamus.
Mr. Finnegan.
Brendan Gleeson is elite.
A legend.
But yeah, there is a lot of focus on Feyre's love life. Tamlin says that she's clean, which
earns him an encouraging nod from Lucian.
Which is
by the way,
so bizarre.
It would be very uncomfortable to be Feyre sitting here at this table. Like, they're being kind of creepy.
Also, isn't it weird that, like, clearly Tamlin is, like, the man in charge. Sorry, the male in charge in this scenario.
Yes.
And Lucian's giving him encouraging nods. It kind of sounds like Tamlin isn't so good with the females, and Lucian knows what he's... I'm just going to say it right now. Lucian is a daddy. Everything that he does, right off the bat, I was like, this is going to be a problem for me.
Yeah. Lucian exudes much more confidence.
Lucian has big dick energy.
He does.
And Tamlin, so I think Tamlin will get that. But given this scene with the meats and the sauces and and the flirtation, or attempts at flirtation. Or flattery, Tamlin is not quite there for big dick daddy energy for me yet.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Although I was immediately into the like, he's very mysterious, I think.
Yes, and you love a mysterious man.
I do.
I like it when they're a little more on the nose.
A little bit more forward,
yeah,
shall we say.
I'm not super into subtlety.
And he's very tortured.
Oh, he is.
You can just
so tortured.
Feel the angst rolling off of him in massive waves, which is also huge for me.
It's very hot. Tamlin is hot.
Yes. The strong jaw gives it right away. And they're all very tall.
And that's an Achilles heel for me. You know that.
I also just have to say that if I were in Feyre's shoes, I think regardless of how afraid I was supposed to be of these creatures...
You just can't be that afraid of someone who is a straight 10 out of 10.
You can't! Your body doesn't allow it!
It's a problem!
I think I would immediately be like, oh, well, this could be interesting.
But you know what's tough for me? Like, yes, everyone is incredibly hot. I mean, especially Daddy Lucian. I just struggled with the masks.
Oh, see, that added to that immediately to me was like, okay, we're in the magic realm now.
I got that, but while reading the conversations that happen between characters and just the scenes and how they play out, I would have to remind myself, oh, wait a second, they're doing all of this with a mask on. And, like, I would immediately giggle because I thought it was kind of funny. I couldn't quite take it seriously sometimes.
Interesting.
I would forget they were wearing masks, which I guess is the point, right? Like,
I think you would become a little desensitized to it. But for me, again, it was just, it all added to the mystery.
Well, it's actually...
And it was frustrating because I wanted the masks to come off, but it never made me, like, giggle.
But it's important. That's a good segue into discussing, like, we get our first mention of the blight in these chapters.
Yes.
And the reason that they have these masks is because there was this masquerade 49 years ago. And
Tamlin seems actually in sort of a 180 from his difficulty communicating anything at the dinner table, you know, the first night. He's actually pretty open with Feyre about, well, in the moment it seems like he's being very open with Feyre about what is going on in the lands and why it seems so...
Which, by the way, she has immediate questions about. She's like, why is he giving me all this information?
Yes.
Because she ain't no dummy, Feyre. She knows how to survive.
She's very street smart, and she understands that he is exposing weaknesses to her, which means that he must be very confident that she is never going back to the mortal realm. Yes. So she definitely does have that moment. But the most important thing is the context that we as readers are getting in that moment. And I thought this was actually a really good scene where you don't feel like a character is being given context for the sake of the audience.
Yes.
It was context that made sense for Tamlin to give Feyre in that way at that time.
And that is actually something I noticed in these 5 chapters, because that was something I struggled with, and we talked about in our previous episode. I felt like I was being shown, not told. Oh wait, no, I was being told not shown. And in these chapters, I agree with you.
Yes.
Like, even especially, like, when the mention of, like, her mother dying of typhus, and it just seemed very genuine, like, the concern from, like,
Tamlin.
Yeah,
these seem like conversations that would naturally happen.
As you're getting to know another person.
Right. And I also felt like in that moment where Tamlin is giving her this context and talking about the blight, the sickness on the land, she immediately has a question about whether or not it would affect the mortal lands, which also made sense to me. And he says that, yes, it could affect mortals. And you can see that it's something that's really weighing on him. And in that moment, to me, it also felt like this was sort of an olive branch moment. He, I think, is trying to show her that this is her home now. And he's sort of trying to just level with her.
I agree.
A little bit.
Also, moments of decency with Tamlin. That, like, we didn't... and there wasn't time to get to know him in the last 5 chapters. And this is, like, our initial...
and he starts to get a little frustrated that she's not immediately warming up to him.
And it's like... Dude, you kidnapped her.
But to be fair, you and I both just agreed that if it were us, we probably would have warmed up a little faster because of how beautiful they are.
Yes.
So maybe it's kudos to Feyre for not being dazzled.
You make an excellent point.
Maybe she's a stronger woman than we.
So, Tamlin showing Feyre around the grounds.
Well, he tries to show her around the grounds, and she says no. Twice. So Lucian showing Feyre around the grounds.
Yes. This was a fun little stepping stone, I thought, like, in their friendship and in their relationship.
And we can get into that a little bit more in the spoiler section, but it was definitely the first moment. Like, we sort of have this first moment of connection between she and Tamlin when they talk about the blight, and then we have this sort of first moment of connection with her and Lucian.
Right.
In a similar conversation where Lucian is telling her a little bit more about the world that she's now living in, about the high fae versus the lesser fae. And he also lets slip, if word got back to her, that I was saying some of these things.
I know, and things that I definitely noticed the first time, but kind of skated past. And rereading this, I was like, antennas going up! And writing it down in our spoiler section.
Yes, we'll get into that more in the spoiler section.
But I liked that this chat that they had between them definitely makes Lucian seem more personable. You kind of get the first moments of him without his snark and his sarcasm and his cheering.
Feyre sort of quips back at him finally towards the end.
Oh, and I love that because Alice tells her that she should do that earlier on.
Yes, she does.
She's like, Lucian could do with a bit of back chat, basically.
And he does. And as soon as she sort of quips back at him and stands up to him, there's a shift there.
Yes.
And he gives her, like, this little nugget of approval almost. And he says, that's better.
Yes, exactly.
So, one other thing that I wanted to make sure we chat about before we move into sort of the final events of this section is the detail that Tamlin has ensured that Feyre's family is being fed and cared for.
And this is another indication as to, like, he is a decent person.
He's calling out her prejudice. You've decided that we are so monstrous that you think I would take a family's only source of nourishment and income and leave them with nothing.
Yeah, it's just not who he is.
It's not who he is. But it's a challenging moment.
I think she
for
gets
Feyre
a pass
too.
for being scared and for being prejudiced.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Even that is a challenging moment for Feyre because it's bittersweet because she realizes her family doesn't need her anymore. And she never felt like her family loved her, but at least they needed her. And the fact that she has this realization that her family would now rather she never came back, which is compounded by her father telling her at the end of chapter 5, even if you escape, don't come back here. And he, of course, was saying it because he was hoping that maybe she could go and have a better life. But to Feyre, it just felt like she was unwanted. And now she's not only unwanted, she's not needed either.
Yes, and there's a few moments where, I think there's actually one, I forget, it's chapter 7 or chapter 8, where Tamlin calls her, he says, you're insignificant enough that your presence won't cause any kind of,
which just layers on to what she's already
and
struggling.
he said it as an offhand comment, almost meant it not as a compliment, but to be like, it's okay, don't worry, like you're not
you have
gonna...
nothing to worry about, no one cares about you.
Yeah, and then of course she, because of
and she
her
remembers
experience,
she brings it back up in her mind several times, insignificant enough not to be a bother. Like, that stays with her.
Yes, and I really feel for Feyre as she's kind of navigating these new and treacherous spring court waters. And speaking of treachery,
yes,
this little moment that we have with the Boggy.
We're back to the Boggy
at the end of chapter 10.
To be fair, it does... Everything about the Boggy is terrifying except for its name.
That is so true. I remember reading this and I was like, oh.
I was scared. All the things that it's... And I imagine it sort of like a Dementor, but you can't see it.
Interesting.
And the way that it, like, whispers nasty things.
You know what I thought about? Did you ever watch that Netflix movie where it was like, the things come and take over the world, but you can't look at them, otherwise you die?
Was it the Bird Box movie?
Well, that was similar. That was... Oh, yes, you couldn't look... Yes, Bird Box. That was it. You couldn't look at them.
I never watched it.
Oh, well,
it's not really... That's, in my opinion, not the greatest genre.
But the Boggy is scary.
The Boggy is very scary.
And, like, some of the things that it was... Like, her blood froze... And, like, she's staring ahead.
It got very cold. And that's what, again, what made me think of the Dementors. Like, you just... It's like all the joy seeps from the air, and it's very scary.
Yes, and then she asks if that was the cereal, and Lucian says no. Yeah. And we get our first mention of the cereal in these chapters. I know, I can't wait to discuss the cereal.
I know, next episode we can talk a lot more about the cereal.
But he says when you look at it, when you acknowledge it, that's when it becomes real.
That's when it can kill you.
And I do love the way that SJM writes sometimes, a shiver spider walked down my spine. Like, she just has, like, this language that she uses that really evokes a very creepy feeling.
Very sinister.
And, yes, sinister. That's a good way of looking at it. She also has that moment when Feyre is wandering the gardens and she's at the edge of the field and she thinks that there are two, like, playful little things watching her.
Yeah.
So we kind of are getting examples of all these different fairies that are like the lesser fae.
Right.
And we have these levels, again, I don't think we discussed this in depth last time. We have the high fae, which are the ruling.
Yes, they literally exist to rule.
And then there are the high lords, which are above the high fae.
Yes.
And then there are the lesser fae and fairies.
And they are all members of the different courts.
Yes, and we experience the bog, we get reference to the cereal, these are all fairies, and then there were two kind of sprightly little things in the garden that she kind of wanted to play with her, but she couldn't see them. So we're just kind of getting our first little moments of, this is a very different world that we are suddenly in, where you are always being watched and never safe, and something is always around the corner.
And you're so much better when you're reading about settling in and really appreciating those moments, and I get a little bit impatient because I'm always looking for the next encounter with
a strong
romantic,
with a strong
jawed male.
AKA hot. No, I love those world-building moments. I think it's because I used to pretend as a kid for hours and hours and hours that I was in them, like at the bottom of my garden, and there were fairies there. And then at the very end of these chapters, we get this very intense moment where Tamlin goes looking for the boggy. But as Tamlin goes out to hunt the boggy, she is kind of looking out her window into the garden, and Feyre sees...
I just have to say, this was a very, very hot Tamlin moment. Very broody.
Oh, when it was like only
powerful.
he can go and kill the boggy?
He just stalks out after being, again, like, Tamlin got rejected in this moment by Feyre.
So he's
not
broody.
fun. And he's broody, and I would be too. And then he has to go deal with this monster on his lands, and he just stalks out. And Feyre's like, where is he going? And Lucien says, to hunt the boggy. And she was like, but you said it couldn't be killed.
And he just goes, Tam can.
And
it's like,
which is unfortunately sounds a little bit like a commercial jingle. Like, got tough stains on your
Tam can.
Tam can.
Well, thanks for ruining that for me, Jessica.
It just happened just now in my head. However, let it not take away from me being thoroughly impressed by Tamlin's. You're just starting to understand that Tamlin is not to be trifled with.
Yes. And there is always that moment
very
in
attractive
romantasy where you start to realize, people don't fuck with Tamlin.
No.
Because Tamlin is in charge of all situations.
All the time.
And it's very hot.
Yeah.
And it's a problem.
It is a problem.
And then one other thing I wanted to note. And
it's starting to be a problem for Feyre too, because she can't sleep.
Well, I was just about to say, we kind of get the first indications that she is thinking about Tamlin, not in a way where she is scared of him all the time.
Right.
I think we haven't completely eliminated that fear yet.
Well, if he goes, so goes the order for her to be protected.
A little quote from the chapter, ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous to watch for his return, to see if he could indeed survive against the boggy. I turned from the window, about to drag myself into bed. And then something moves out in the garden, and it's her father. But, like, she's starting to think about Tamlin and being, why am I thinking about him? And it's always like,
oh, girl, you know why you're thinking about him.
Fantasy romance novels, let's catch on to your own feelings a little bit quicker.
It's okay.
They are literally in your head. It's okay to think them.
It is okay to have a crush on your captor.
He is a strong-jawed male.
I think that brings us to the end of the events, and we're going to have to wait until the next episode to see how Feyre is going to react to her father.
I know. I like how we've timed these out so that on the end of each 5 chapters seems to be kind of a cliffhanger.
It's almost as if she wrote it intending for someone to do this.
Specifically us two on these 2 sofas.
I'm not going to say it's fate, but...
All right. So this is your warning to tune out if you have not read ahead.
We are entering the spoiler section. Everything from all the books of ACOTAR, all the books of Throne of Glass, all the books of Crescent City, material that we have picked up online from other creators, fan theories, bits from SJM, interviews. Literally, if it is out there in the world,
it is fair game.
It's fair game. If you are not here for the spoilers, we will see you next episode.
Okay, Jessica, now we are in spoiler land.
Oh my god. I always feel like I can take a deep breath and
know.
sort of like relax. Okay, so we get so many nuggets in these chapters.
She is queen of the Easter egg.
I've said it once, I'll say it again. Every day is Easter when you are reading a Sarah J. Maas novel.
I'd love to start with that moment where we are at the dinner table and Tamlin slumps into his chair and there's a flash of really bright white light and he turns from the beast into a golden-haired, strong-jawed male. But I was immediately reminded, ding, 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 of shifting in
Throne of Glass.
And how there is always a flash of white light before anyone turns into their animal.
Yes, and it's a link there that is not... It's not insignificant because of also what we learn when Bryce is in the Asteri libraries and she realizes that there are Fae in many worlds and they are all at least descended from the same sort of original High Fae race.
Yes, and certain things have been bred out.
Out of them.
We know that...
Which means
this
that there
exists in different universes.
Specifically, Tamlin's bloodline must have that connection to the Throne of Glass Fae. I just believe, like, in my opinion, that is a connection. I think it will come back around.
And don't you just love reading these things and stuff that you did not notice the first time around?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And it's also significant that when Lucian is talking about the masks, he says to her they all wore different masks to sort of honor and celebrate Tamlin's shifting abilities. So this is rare, what he can do.
Yes.
This is rare. And that's,
I think it's all the High Lords.
We've had this debate before, and I don't know. I'm going to have to wait and see what happens as I reread the rest of this chapter, because, like, I don't
Helion and Rhys can both... Sorry, Rhys, as per our earlier discussion on pronunciation.
Very controversial pronunciation there.
Helion and Rhys, they both can shift into another beast form.
Beast form?
Yes, because there's a scene in A Court of Wings and Ruin on the battlefield where they are both in their other forms. It's not a beast the same way that Tamlin's beast is, but they are other creatures that they can shift into. I don't know about Thesson, and I don't know about Callias.
Interesting. Yeah, because I particularly that like flash of white light and the fact that Tamlin does it so often makes me think that that is something that is unique to him. And I thought that Feyre's ability to shift
comes from that nugget
from
of power.
From his drop of power.
I'm excited to reread it all again.
Me too.
And kind of figure out exactly what's going on there. A couple other Easter eggs. You want to talk about the little reference to a High Lady?
Yes, I do. Lucian makes the little blunder and references a her, which we know is Amarantha. But Feyre thinks to herself, like, oh, maybe he's talking about someone who is, you know, even higher up than Tamlin. She knows that there are High Lords, but maybe there are also High Ladies, if that were even possible.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh, girl!
If you only knew!
If you only knew that she would be the first.
Another moment I really loved was when Feyre tries to calm herself down. She thinks of a starry, unclouded night sky, peaceful and glittering and endless.
When was this?
It was in chapter 7 or 8. But there's little nuggets of things that calm her down and like center her. And
one of them is a
starry night sky. And I don't even know if we need to go
further into that. I don't even think we need to say anything else.
Yeah, it was this hilarious moment when Feyre booby trapped the door.
Oh,
and
yes.
Alice goes, what in the bottomless depths of the cauldron? And I just like, we didn't really talk about...
Cauldron, boil me.
Burning Solas.
Burning Solas. Erd. All of the different gods and goddesses.
The cauldron definitely took a little bit of time for me to get used to.
I think we should hold our discussion on cauldron lore until we get to the mural.
But what we can say is that it was just a tough adjustment for me, this cauldron situation. Like, I had trouble taking it seriously as I was reading this. Anytime anyone would say,
because
by
when
the cauldron,
it made me think of, like, witches or, like, of Hogwarts, you know?
Yeah.
What is the song? Dun, dun, dun.
Bubble, bubble,
toilet trouble, yeah.
Fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. Which is literally Shakespeare, but they make it funny in Harry Potter.
Yes.
And so there's all these connotations and associations that I have with the word cauldron, and she's saying, what are the bottomless depths of the cauldron? And I'm just like, oh my god, I can't take you seriously.
That's a good exclamation, though.
Those are all my little foreshadowing moments that I had. There was one little moment where Tamlin kind of got jealous that Feyre went hunting with Lucian, and, like, he didn't do anything overly...
Well, I do think we should unpack a little bit what's really going on here at the dinner table when they're poking around in Feyre's love life.
So
Tamlin is trying to flirt with her, and I don't remember the fine print of this bargain that Amarantha made with Tamlin.
This is what I remember of it. It is that someone who has nothing but hate in their heart for fairies.
Did it have to be immortal specifically?
It has to be immortal specifically.
Okay, yes.
They have to make, Tamlin has to make that mortal fall in love with him.
Right. And he had how many years to do it?
50.
He had 50 years to do it. So this is the final year.
We are in the
last
final countdown.
petal is falling.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It really is just like Beauty and the Beast.
Yes. Oh, but it's great. Like I love that she took sort of a beloved fairy tale story and reinvented it in the way that she has.
100%.
It's wonderful. Was it just that the mortal needed to fall in love with... And by the way, so this is... The blight is really just Amarantha's curse.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to break that curse is just for the mortal to fall in love with Tamlin, or does he also have to fall in love with her? Because in Beauty and the Beast, it's both.
I think he has to fall in love with her too, but we'll research and circle back.
Okay.
I was getting some Edward Cullen-y vibes from Tamlin. He was very jealous.
When he forced her to sit down and eat, and that got very territorial of her.
Yeah, and then also, like, when it was very clear that, like, they had come back from hanging out, to be fair, he had been rejected earlier, and so then to see Feyre coming back with Lucien would have been annoying. Okay, winners and losers of the chapters? I actually haven't decided mine, so I'm going to go on the fly. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I'm also going on the fly today.
I think the winner is going to be... I think winner's going to be Lucien. Like, he starts solidifying a friendship with Feyre. He's the one who actually gets her to start, like, talking about where she comes from. Like, he gives her some information. They start a friendship. It seems like the first actual friendship that exists between any of the characters we have thus far is forming between those two. He clearly was able to do it, and Tamlin wasn't in these 5 chapters. And he's also better at flirting, apparently, than Tamlin.
I think I have to agree with you, just because I can't really think of any other character that's...
I mean, it's not Tamlin.
He's my loser, I think.
I was going to go with Alice. She did get booby trapped.
I thought that too.
She literally gets booby trapped.
She did get booby trapped. That sucks. And all she has been is nice to Feyre.
Exactly.
Okay, so loser is Alice. Honorable mention goes to Tamlin for starting off very strong, kind of botching it, and then stalking off into the forest to go kill something because he's broody.
He has a slight arc at the end because that is very hot.
Listen, his attractiveness and his mystery never wavers, but there is no forward progress really between he and Feyre the way there is between, I think, Lucien and Feyre.
Hence,
because at least with Lucien and Feyre, I think she's less afraid of Lucien than she is of Tamlin for some reason. She's very fixated on the claws.
Yeah, she does get really afraid of the claws.
Really freak her out about Tamlin, which I guess is fair.
100%.
Yeah, I think that would unnerve me as well.
So I think that brings us to the end of our episode, Jessica.
And what a lovely episode it's been, Isabel.
It really has. And, you know, it was a little bit dicey to start because Jessica and I were a little hungover this morning, but...
I think we pulled through.
I think. Cheers.
Cheers. We'll be back to sipping vino by next episode, don't you worry. We will be diving into chapters 11 to 15.
A lot happens in 11 to 15.
We're very excited.
And we can't thank you guys enough for tuning in and listening to us. We are so happy to be here discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses with you.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you back on the next episode.